From an unstructured marketplace kind of a scenario to becoming a very structured organization and industry. Today we are going to talk about a very integral part of weddings, which is flowers. We have the entrepreneurs of the Interflora India, Tarun Joshi and Anuja Joshi.
India has obviously started consuming the cut flowers very lately, and therefore someone has to take the leadership and onus.
And between the two of you all, how do you all divide your roles?
This planning process, I think, is something I look at, while Anuja is completely taking care of the whole design sensibility elements.
We've had the capacity. We've done the largest weddings of the country and the smallest.
Weddings, we are very selective.
What are the typical challenges that you face during execution?
So a lot of last minute family requests are always, but I would not say it's a challenge now, it's a given.
And all the painful planners and designers. Welcome to the Insider series of the Wedding Podcast. In the Insider series, we've been talking in depth and having conversations with experts who bring to the table everything that you'd like to know about the wedding segment. And today, we are going to talk about a very integral part of weddings, which is flowers. I mean, you can't think of a wedding without flowers. And this has existed as long as that has existed. Can't even say that. Probably flowers existed way before weddings started or the marriages started. But this industry has blossomed to absolutely different heights in the wedding segment. From an unstructured marketplace kind of a scenario to becoming a very structured organization and industry. The International Flower Agency Interflora entered in 2018, and today with us we have the entrepreneurs of the Interflora India, Tarun Joshi and Anuja Joshi. Welcome to the Wedding Podcast.
Thank you, lovely to be here.
Your introductions are not just Interflora, I have to talk a little more about it. To my audience, I don't know where to start introducing Tarun because I get super nervous. He is a tech entrepreneur, an angel investor, an aeronautical scientist, and what else am I missing, Tarun?
A national badminton player.
Oh my God. I mean, he wears so many hats and I don't know how. And Anuja, who was an educationist, has turned into a floral visionary in the country and taken this entire flower industry to great heights with Interflora. When we talk of flowers in our wedding segment, the name Interflora comes up most of the times because I think people want that professional approach, and which you guys started brilliantly. I want you all to talk a little bit about your journey, how this started, whose thought was it, where did it come from?
So honestly, I've always been very passionate about getting best international practices into the country, and that's how even when I was in the education industry, I was heading an IB school of international baccalaureate, and once when I was traveling, I got this amazing Interflora bouquet, and I was like just lured by the sheer variety, size, and the quality of the flowers and the shelf life. It lasted for like 7 to 10 days. And cut to in India, when we see it was always a challenge. There were like very limited variety of flowers that were available. Plus, the quality in the markets were very. It was a very unorganized market. A $2 billion market flower industry, which was very unorganized, and that's when we started researching, and that's how the journey started.
And Tarun, when did you jump into it? And with all that you do and you manage to run so many businesses, how did this interest happen for you?
I think two parts to it. One is the whole business planning.
Yeah.
So I started looking at the flower industry. Let me give you some stats. So India has always consumed a lot of flowers, but we consume flowers in two ways. One is what we call as loose flowers, which we use for puja, simple decorations at house, right? That is predominantly a very large portion. And then the second piece is cut flowers, which are used either in bouquets or in wedding industry, right? Because it needs to be a structured petal, which needs to go in, right? And overall, it was a $3 billion market, but $2 billion out of that is just the loose flowers. Okay, but a significant proportion of this was moving towards cut flowers as people with more discretionary income start to put products into their own houses, subscription models increase, super chains or supermarkets will start carrying flowers, right? And if we see just the cut flower market, 50% of that was in the wedding industry. So if you are in the flower business and if you are in the cut flower business, you have to be well spread out between the wedding industry as well as the consumption industry. So I think the business side was very important. The second was...
So you saw white space and you decided this could become a very structured model.
So logic was very clear, right? A $3 billion industry with no one having more than 1% market share, right? There was just no organized player who is trying to do it. Now in other parts of the world, this has evolved over 100 years, right? India has obviously started consuming the cut flowers very lately, and therefore someone has to take the leadership and own us.
It was like seriously the most pioneer move. I remember hearing you all at one of the conferences of wedding, and that was the first time we all got introduced to Interflora, where you launched and spoke about how it's going to be. And for all of us, we thought, oh, this is going to be an expensive affair. I mean, the cold chain model and, you know, how you're going to operate. But I think you guys really penetrated the market of weddings. I know there is a whole retail size that runs on an auto mode for y'all and does brilliantly well. But in the wedding segment, which has so many different dynamics of working with different kind of entities, sometimes with planners, sometimes with designers, sometimes with the family directly. How do you all take lead in that, and how did you make sure that, you know, your mindset from a retail and a structured model to yet handle this unstructured space in a professional way?
Okay. We work with the best designers in the country. And internationally, when you work, wedding is a very organized space yet, because they plan way well in advance. Everything is kind of, quantities are decided, there are recipes made. It's the whole process was very different internationally versus the way it's done in India. So I think that, and we were lucky enough to work with the best designers across the globe, right from Preston to Jeff Leatham to Karen Tran, and I think we've had so many learnings from them of how it needs to be approached. And cut to when you come to India, India has some fabulous wedding designers, and we've worked with all of them. And then when we co-curate with them, I think that's when it's interesting, when we get our very planned, structured way of doing things and their design sensibilities, when it comes together, I think that is a very interesting marriage.
It's more like a win-win at that.
So that's what I think weddings are all about, collaborations, and that's what we've realized. Definitely, however planned you are, there are going to be these unplanned moments. There's going to be challenges, hiccups, and that's where the jugaad comes in. And that's so there is a whole different team that works on the online very structured piece, and there's this whole team of designers, curators who work more on the wedding side.
And between the two of you all, how do you all divide your roles?
So honestly,
I would say there is the design sensibility part of it, and then there is the operational efficiency as well as I would say forte that we have created. I think 90% of the work is executed very well in a timely manner, because you're dealing with perishable products if the planning is correct. So about 15 to 20 days in advance of any event. Now, planner typically will have hundreds of things on the plate. What they want is a partner who can probably get this done in the vision that has been actually sold to the client. Right? That is super important. Now, if you start looking at that, the first thing that happens is what is going to be the color palette, because today with the flower color palette is what the consumers are also looking at their dress palette, right? So everything will change. Complements, right? So once the color palette is available, then you start going via availability of flowers from which part of the world during which time of the year. So for example, summers will have European flowers, right? Winters, if you need the same kind of flowers, you have to go to Australia or New Zealand. So our thought process of having linkages to make sure that the right variety is available in the right way. Then also what happens depending on the quantity and the size of the wedding, it is super important that how much advance you plan. There are things like what day it would be cut, what day it would be transported, right? Flowers is, I think 70-80% of the problem statement is solved via better transportation. It's a business of logistics. You have to get the flowers at the right time. You need flight spaces from various parts of the world to arrive. You need time for clearance. You need cold trucks to move. You need cold chain solutions to be at the site to keep them well so that they look the most pretty and the most beautiful on the day of the wedding.
Wow.
Right? So this planning process, I think, is something I look at. While Anuja is completely taking care of the whole design sensibility, elements, what props will look beautiful.
And all the painful planners and designers. Not to forget that. Everybody who doesn't understand this side at all. I mean, it's so interesting, Tarun. Like, I have known you all for so long. But when I hear this and I feel like, oh God, I thought I do a tough job of logistical nightmares of moving guests from here to there. But moving flowers from one place to another is a totally different gambit, you know. And just tell me one thing, in this whole process, like you said, it's seasonal. How do pricing vary? Like, where do we stand when we import flowers as India compared to other countries? Because you guys are an international chain, if you can throw some light on that.
So historically, Holland used to be the biggest exchange, right? It still continues to be the largest organized exchange. Flowers from all over the world are traded on the exchange. So it's like a stock market, right, floor, which now has gotten converted to screens. But there are people who are sitting on the screens and booking products which actually are grown in various parts of the world.
Oh.
So first is because of having an international chain, we have a very strong dealer network, which means people who are dedicatedly buying for us. Then comes secondary question. So first is availability. For example, a planner has made a design saying, I need 70,000 tulips and I need orange tulips. It needs to look like a tulip garden. Now the question is, arranging 70,000 tulips is more important. Secondary question that happens is price. But if you look at India is one of the cheapest producers of flowers, but the problem is the variety. It's increasing, right? But we have historically seen maybe 10-12 varieties. Interflora currently deals with 82 varieties of
82 varieties
of flowers
around the year.
Wow.
Okay, so that's you need to have that kind of availability of flowers.
Yeah.
Now in pricing, if you look at it, typically people think that large quantities should be cheaper, but it's the reverse. Whenever you need very large quantity, you are technically eroding away certain farms, right, fully for a particular wedding, because you need the same color, you need the same palette, and you need the look to not be like an ombre look. It should just be a flat look in a color, right? So larger quantities become more expensive. Smaller quantities are easy to solve for. Larger quantities have a better logistics because you are on volumetric weight, right? Smaller quantities will have higher logistics. So that's the dynamics you play with.
And our weddings are just getting larger and larger by the day.
And I think that's why it's very interesting, and probably I would like to tell that to the audience also, is that it's before they go and sell a design, it's important that they come and discuss back and say, hey, we might just be in a better position to recommend, do not sell tulips, sell something else, which is beneficial for the family, beneficial for them as well as the price. Like flowers, unfortunately, it's tagged as expensive, but it's there. If it is kind of well planned and well thought through, it can be done in all the budgets.
That's such a brilliant point you've made, Anuja, because I don't think any planner or designer would be calling you all prior. And if we make that as a practice of just checking with you of what is it that one could recommend at this time of the year, or which are the flowers that you recommend will go best with this design sensibility. I think the whole challenge of trying to value engineer and get the cost down later and sit through negotiations for hours and hours can be cut out to a large extent.
And that's why we push as much as possible to all the planners, designers, or the families also. Flowers today, given the scale of the weddings that we do or that are happening in India, is almost like 30 to 40% of the budget.
Yes.
And it's important that you get your floral partner or the designer on board right in the beginning. Take them through the entire planning stage. Two benefits: A, you get to understand the families or the couple's vision firsthand, rather than having it through and through via the planner or the designer and like a Chinese whisper and like, you know. So I think you can do more justice to it where you're involved right in the beginning. Plus you can build a lot of flower efficiency into the design, into the elements, if you're involved right from the beginning.
I know, but you know, Anuja, how our industry, I mean, there's so much insecurity to take the end, you know, source, or I would say vendor, straight to the, you know, family. I think every planner or designer must be having this whole shield of trying to not get you to talk to the client, and which is unfortunately a big reality in our industry.
But I think now it's changing somehow.
Is it?
I feel,
are you seeing
because you know, over the years, and like just to go like couple of years behind, I think flowers were just about filling it up, or to hide the ugly elements ki okay yahan wire dikh raha hai, ye dikh raha hai, like, you know, to kind of make it proper. Versus now, because it's becoming an integral part, and there are partners and planners, designers who we've worked with over the last couple of years, who know that we're not going to go to the client directly. Like, that's a conversation we have with them.
That's a faith they got to have.
And probably that's the faith that they have, and they are like, okay, why don't we co-curate, why don't we co-design, so that they can focus on like the softer elements, the fabrics and the lighting and all the other things, and then we help them take their vision with flowers ahead, but in as a process.
And over the years, Tarun, what's the ratio? Are you seeing the wedding space grow for Interflora, or your retail space is growing?
I think retail is a much larger market, as I told you, right? Weddings, we are very selective. For us, rather than going mass, it is very important that every year, as Anuja was saying, we like to build relationship with a few planners, get them a little comfortable. We are not the ones who are probably advertising ourselves that we are a full stack company, which means that we would always be co-partnering, partnering or supporting. And that's a very human touch and feel and comfort zone.
True.
Right? So if you think that, okay, let me do, last year I did 50 weddings, let me do like 200 this year. That is not possible, because that is only possible if you have, let's say, instead of 10 planners, this year 20, and that relationship can't be built. So we have seen that for weddings, let us go a little organic. Let us try and increase the scale of things that we do.
True.
Let us try and get more and more involved into more number of projects with each planner once the comfort starts to get built out. So that's how our approach has been.
I think, you know, we've never looked at it as 100 weddings or 200 weddings, because I think those are the number of days or savas that are there in a year. Plus, obviously, there's a lot of overlap. And on any given day, even if we've had the capacity, we've done the largest weddings of the country and the smallest, like, you know, we a complete spectrum. But once we are committed to a wedding, we don't like on a given date, and if there's take more than one or two, like, you know, that is something that, and even if we have the capacity, because there, like we said, there could be challenges, there could be shortfalls, and I think to do justice to the planner, the designer and the family, they would like us there.
Absolutely.
Like, you know, it's just the face value, it's what you kind of build together. So that is something that we are very clear of.
What are the typical challenges that you face during execution?
So it could start from a flight getting derouted and your flowers don't arrive on site, to you know, though we've done all the sampling, everything is kind of approved, but on site there are times where you know, the client just, or the certain things are changes the color palette last minute. That has also happened. I think last minute maybe the designer has kind of envisioned certain things which is not looking, and then it is always that, okay, make it beautiful with flowers. So a lot of last minute family requests are always, but I would not say it's a challenge now, it's a given. But flowers being perishable could always be a little challenging at times.
So you all must be like planning of having always that little additional stock or something kept, which is not going to be shown to the designer, planner or family, but okay, now you want something different, let me get this out, because you know, that's the only way to probably handle a last minute request. How would you do that if it's so cut to cut and so clearly bought in with the exact numbers, you know?
See, minimum there is about 10% extra flowers which are always
Okay.
ordered because it's a perishable product.
Yeah.
You have to do refurbishment and things like that. But again, first I would say is whenever there is lack of planning, which means we like to put it saying in a wedding there are typically about 40 elements.
Yeah.
Each element should have a recipe.
Sure.
Each element should have a sampling done.
Yeah.
Each element will have the list of flowers. Each element will also have a list of substitution flowers available if things are to change. If that sheet is maintained properly, everything goes super smooth. Then after that, it's only about getting the flowers, which Anuja said that typically flights are cancelled, offloaded. Like in recent event, we realized that there was no Lufthansa which was flying out, and therefore things went to Turkey, and from Turkey things were even further delayed, right? So flight route itself changed, right? So that's something which you have to then control in the best possible manner. And that's why the timing is very important. We typically keep almost about 2 days buffer, right? So all our flowers usually arrive at least 2 days prior to the wedding. And those are also split between flights so that we at least have 80% always available in whatever condition, right? So that's one piece. The second is also respect for space.
Yeah.
If you do not have a proper working space available, it leads to much more wastage.
I agree.
Right? I think the respect for, like how we would give space to sound, technicians, artists, right? Flowers should be considered in that way. Whenever we have had great space, I think the working is super smooth because then you don't work on the site. You just place on the site, right? And third, I would say is involvement at the structure design. Oasis foam has to be put. Water will drip, there needs to be proper channeling of that, right? All those things need to be thought through well.
The weight, the weight
weight considerations.
Weight is always a challenge.
And at times you would put like humongous amount of truss or put larger truss structures which may not be required.
And then just cover this, more foliage, just put this.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure you'll have to carry extra foliage all the time. Or greens all the time to try and cover some ugly spots here and there.
Yeah, that is always in the planning.
What is the shelf life of, which is the flower that lasts the most or lasts the least, and what's the biggest demand in the Indian market?
So to talk of, honestly, obviously the flowers grown in the colder countries like your hydrangeas, peonies, tulips are the delicate flowers, and they will definitely like their shelf life is way different than regular other flowers. But I would actually like to put it as it's very, very important. It's not the shelf life of the flower, it's the cut stage at which the flower is kind of bought, plus the entire cold chain. To repeat what he said, but the flower is all about a science of it should not get weather condition shock. So it's so if you can maintain the cold chain right from where it's cut to your premise, the flower can last. Like we've used in Jaipur in the scorching heat in the open, we've used hydrangeas, peonies, tulips, all for an event we were doing for Clinique, and it all lasted. So it's all about getting the flower at the right cut stage plus the kind of conditioning that you do to it. So and that's why I know in our industry it is almost 80% of the time you would not get the space 2 days in advance, right? But these flowers do require a lot of prep time. I think the saving grace for us is across 25 cities we do have our own cold rooms.
Oh, that's lovely.
So when we try to ensure whichever is the closest, but we try to condition a lot of flowers there, pre-prep, a lot of stuff is done there which kind of is then brought to site. So that has been like our saving grace. But coming back to the flower question, a lot depends on the cut stage and the conditioning.
But you can assume that all flowers technically have at least about 10 days from the date it is cut, right? If they are traveled in the right condition. If they are going through shocks, every shock reduces it by 3 days.
Yeah, I'm exhausted listening. Honestly, it's so tiring. I don't know how you guys pull it off. And what's the kind of team size? Like, how does this operate internally for you guys? What are the departments? How do you all function?
We have especially on the wedding side, we have a very strong design team, because that's we always believe
to collaborate with
the designers and to plan, and the team is divided largely into a big a design team, and this design team luckily has worked with most of the international
Yes.
designers and all the talented designers of the country. So then it's like a very interesting mix of Indian as well as imported. Like it's a blend, a fusion of all the styles that we could do. Plus then there is a whole flower sourcing team and a logistic team, flower sourcing team, which itself is also about some 30-40 people, because that, like he said, it's a business of logistics. And in most of the weddings, including I think the front and the back end prep, it is like nothing less than, like any given wedding, I think it's about 200-300 people are always on site. The larger, I'm not talking about the larger weddings, like a regular wedding.
Anuja, in terms of the Indian flowers today, do you all also do a lot of work in the Indian flower space, or is it only imported and international flowers that one reaches out to you?
So in India, we are working very closely with about 200 to 300 growers, and these growers grow colors and varieties that we kind of need and want. So they specially work for us. So this is like, and it could be right from your cymbidiums to your hydrangeas to, like, you know, in fact this year we are experimenting with a lot of peonies also growing in India. So definitely we work with growers to grow a lot of this in India, and a lot of Indian flowers also. So it is not just the cut flowers but your Indian traditional work. So we have teams that do that.
So your supply chain exists in India too.
Yes. Yeah. So Indian flowers, let me first give you a funny story. So I went to a flower shop and asked them, I need a purple rose, right? And it's a particular kind of purple rose, right? That we sort of sought. The guy said, you need the Interflora rose.
Oh!
Right. So a lot of work is going on, I would say on the Indian flowers. How I look at it is, there are domestic flowers, which are your roses, carnations, lilies, gerberas, right, which are already existing, hydrangeas, etc., which have started growing now in India. And then there is a lot of local flowers, right, which is the tube roses, right, and the marigold. We work on both sides. I think there is a lot of weaving work, etc., which happen on local flowers, right? I think we're building a lot of capability on that side. If you see any wedding, usually it will have about 40% imported and 60%, right, local flowers. But the local flowers or domestic flowers that we use are all very high grade export quality, and because of the retail business we have access to a lot of those, and they are mostly pre-bought. So 85% of those are grown at growers end with head sizes of roses, etc., very well defined, because eventually if you get a high head size rose, even at 40% extra, it's covering 2x the area.
Correct.
So overall the client is only, right, getting benefited. So we tell them, don't start looking at per stem, start looking at what areas are getting covered.
Oh yeah, that is
very
very interesting perspective.
Yeah.
And in terms of percentage that you said, what do you think is a percentage of natural flowers and artificial flowers today?
All depends, I guess, on the scale
and the budget.
Yeah, I would say artificial is also equally expensive.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's a myth, another myth that I would like to break.
Please break this myth for our audience.
Because I think people think of flowers only when and correlated to budget, but sometimes the quality that we are using could be equally expensive to a fresh flower, because definitely people don't want to, you don't want it to be stark difference between your fresh and your faux, and now there is very good quality faux flower available.
What's it called? Faux flower?
Faux flower, as in the
you don't want to call it artificial.
It's available, but which is very close to the texture of the real flowers. We try to typically use it just when there are production deadlines, like when you have huge structures and then you want to pre-prep them in advance, or when
then there's height probably.
There is a lot of height and it's not going to be touched immediately by the families,
by the guests or anybody.
But what is interesting is if it is used interestingly and smartly, and there are very intricate, interesting techniques to actually use these faux flowers, where it can be used to give a lot of volume, and then it's topped with fresh flowers.
Yeah.
So if it is used smartly with the right colors and textures, I think they are good, but do not use it just to cut costs.
Yeah. So most importantly, what you're trying to say is it's not necessarily going to cut cost for you.
Right.
but it probably is a better solution operationally to deal with a few things, right?
Operationally, or if the design really demands in a
Demands a
particular way,
certain-
if there's like a lot of volume, then it's just going to help build a lot of texture or color to the whole look and feel.
Like think of an example like velvet
Yeah.
material rose,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Now that comes closest to your real rose, right? Which
Yeah.
is the deep red
Yeah.
rose. If you were to blend those things well, it's not only the height, but it is you don't get the visual of that particular structure unless you don't have things put up.
Yeah.
Right now, so it saves costs in a way that it gives you the base framework,
Yeah.
and then you top it up in the right way to bring the full look out. Right. So I think it is an integral portion of getting the desired design
Yeah.
right, apt to what has been agreed.
True, true. I think that makes so much sense, because the biggest myth is, let's go the artificial route, it will work cheaper. And I'm sure there's quality in that also, there's varied qualities in that also.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the best quality is going to be expensive. But people, are these on kind of rental basis, or how does this work? The dynamics of the
See, as
four
Anuja
flowers.
mentioned that silk flowers is, so I call it silk. so silk flowers are more expensive.
Yeah,
And you obviously cannot charge the entire amount.
yeah.
So it becomes a strong proprietary strength of anybody floral who's working on to keep a very strong amount of inventory, and obviously use a certain proportion as rental cost.
Yes.
Otherwise, why would you ever put it
I agree.
in that, right? So it has to work in that way.
Interesting. That's been quite an insight, because I don't think people deep dive to that extent and understand. Now let's make it a little lighter, because I think my audience will say like we've gone so
Yeah, I think
technical
it's
into
so
this,
technical.
so technical into this. But I think that was so important also, because this is the Insider series. But now give us that one story that is super interesting, maybe of a celebrity wedding, of any other wedding that that you feel has been quite a memory for you guys. Whether it was a challenge, whether it was a funny anecdote or whatever. But give us that one wedding story, please.
Too many.
Too many. I know. I always say I can write a book, but I think I'll choose to do that when I retire from this business.
Don't worry, we'll not let you. I think we've just been lucky to been able to work with a lot of celebrities.
Yes.
And it's a whole different experience when you work with celebrity families, and the entire experience of trying to keep it hush hush, under the carpet, don't let everyone
Yeah.
know. Though everybody already knows it, but you act as if you're not going to tell anyone, like you try your best, I would say. But yeah, so...
Have you all had any any stories where you all have met the celebrity couple, but you can't disclose it yet to your team?
all the time.
All the time.
All the
Yeah.
time. And it was quite funny when, like, we're like, okay, saying we're not doing Alia Ranbir, and there's media standing down with Interflora t-shirts, and they are actually capturing our boys going in, and then we're like, okay, no t-shirts. So I'm like, you
Yeah.
try your
I mean,
best.
how much can you
but,
really keep this under wraps?
yeah,
On the
so
day
but
of execution, it kind of comes out.
It kind of
But that
comes
wedding
out.
looked so lovely, Anuja.
Yeah, and it was so intimate.
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was a dream.
What's
like,
your personal favorite, intimate or the large scale? I'm business-wise, Tarun will say large scale, I know that, but...
Not only business wise,
I think,
I like the operational complexity,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Of
That's
just
true.
executing large
I'm
scale.
sure that gives you a different rush altogether.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's all about scale always.
Yeah.
For me, irrespective of the scale, like, even if it's large scale, but it's more about the detailing. It's not just about filling flowers, but even if you're doing the centerpieces, how you could kind of marry it with interesting props, make it fun, cool. Like, how do you kind of give it your own twist? And nowadays it's like so much of, like, you'll have a lot of your international flowers, your Western flowers with a twist of Indian,
Yeah.
like a whole chadar going over it. So I think it's more about these detailings that kind of interest and intrigue me than just the
And do
scale.
you find a lot of brides and the mothers or family of the bride extremely knowledgeable and knowing what they really want? Or?
Most of the time.
Yeah, they are.
And And I think that's what makes it even exciting and challenging, because most of the families we work with are well traveled, well exposed to most of the weddings of the country, and then to kind of curate something that will kind of put them in awe and yet tell their story and get their personality. So it's so much, I think wedding design is kind of so much inspired by art, architecture, design, because that's what the families are coming with. So they'll be like so specific, I would want these flowers with this color palette, or we've seen this and this is what we like. So I think it's interesting and challenging to have
fulfill their dreams and
And
their
to
wish
have
list.
Like one tough project that we had done, the theme was the client had a very specific requirement that I want not red but coral red to come out. Now there is only one flower which is peony, and a particular color of peony which on day 3 turns coral red, because it opens up and it starts fading and it hits into coral red. And the requirement was, we want the entire staircase to be coral red. So there were like almost about 10,000 peonies of that particular farm, and put on a date such that day 3 was the wedding date when everything turned coral red.
And mind you,
People
that was
are-
our first project.
What are you
Yes,
saying?
and that was our first and the largest project. And
Where
then we
was
were like,
that?
Mumbai.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but
Who was the planner?
I think we worked with a designer called Karen Tran for that project. Yeah, she was the one who
Lovely.
conceptualized this. Yeah, but there are these kind of difficult
And you all have
problems.
worked with a lot of international designers. In terms of experience with them, what is this very big difference that you see, and something that we should all kind of try and adapt?
planning.
I think the 3 things that I was explaining about, we learned a lot of those from the designers. Number 1, they are extremely particular about their space of working.
Yeah.
Because they say, look, my output depends on what space is allocated to me. I want to be stress-free, work and create a piece of art out of every single thing.
Yes.
I think that's one. The second is putting almost about a day out of the 2 days into just pre-prepping the flowers. Because they say, however beautiful I will put the flowers, they will die or they will not be in the best shape if they're not pre-prepped. In fact, they would put their entire team and get our entire team initially and would basically say every stem needs to be cut, water needs to be changed every 2 hours, flower food needs to be put into everyone, because otherwise all the hard work that we are doing, we will leave the site at 2 o'clock.
Yeah.
The wedding is going to start at 5 or 6 o'clock. By that time, they won't look the best. So let's put that 1 day of work. So that extreme attention towards detail, right, is super, super important. And then recipe. Have very proper recipe.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
And I think one more, just to add to his point, is like, keep the last 2-3 hours to finish.
Yes.
And to complete, like, it's very easy to kind of place a centerpiece. But then again, they need that little finish, little touch-ups. So I think we should budget about couple of hours before handover to kind of just, I mean, I know.
I love this. I can just imagine a scenario, the sound guy is yelling over there and you know how that last 2 hours of chaos
but
that
those
goes
2
on
hours, if
are the most,
they
I
can
totally
really
agree.
change
It can.
the look and feel.
It changes
and
the vibe also.
It changes
Honestly,
the
it
vibe.
changes the energy. Because I've seen that if you've had the last 1 hour or 2 hours really smooth and you're ready, the team that is serving, the team that is going to be client facing is also a lot more relaxed. Otherwise, you can see that tension in everybody.
I think every planner should say, last 1 hour I'm going to do my own photo shoot.
So, but we have a wish list. But it's interesting that like one of the things that we kind of do is, we know that one team has worked all night and whatever said and done, they are exhausted. So in the day of the handover, we get a fresh team.
That's also a very important point you made.
That
I
would
think
really,
people are so stretched and so tired.
and that time they are not thinking of detailing, finish,
the
and
productivity
stuff.
is getting so
So
badly
then that's
affected.
when we get like an army of people and designers who are kind of gonna just kind of fix it right,
And
place
take
it
it on
right,
to the finishing.
put the props and the story the way we had envisaged, and that is what makes the difference.
So all the big, I would say, agencies of the country, designers, flower vendors, artists, everybody has been engaged and super busy with the biggest wedding of Anant and Radhika. And just tell us as much you can in terms of the working experience for this beautiful wedding that happened.
Yeah, so one of the most challenging projects, Jamnagar to be specific, because no airport, closest place being at least about 8 to 10 hours by road, no accommodation facility. It was brought out in a small place, but to bring that whole vision in place, it required a lot of planning.
Sure.
And I think hats off to everybody who was involved. They managed to deliver it. I think it is the best of almost everyone that came out in that project. Right?
I agree. Waste management in the space of flowers happens, Anuja. And is there, I mean, I know of this one organization I keep seeing called Fool, which used to do a lot of waste management for the flowers that they used to take from temples. But in the wedding space, I haven't actually come across any organization, or maybe I'm not aware of it. Is there anybody taking any lead?
So there is an organization that we work with. It's Hari Sudala, that is down south in Bangalore. But I'd just like to first throw a little more light on, like, you know, what sustainability really means when it comes from our perspective.
Sure.
And how are we kind of approaching it. So I think it's very important to understand, because it can be a buzzword.
Yeah.
Like, you know, carbon footprint, sustainability and stuff. But it's very important to firstly understand that where it's coming from and where it's going to go.
True.
That is, I think, the most important thing when we think about sustainability. So when it comes to sourcing, I think we're trying to be a little more aggressive to talk to our growers and see what is it that they're doing. So most of our growers are kind of growing with trying soilless farming, avoiding pesticides. So these are the smaller steps that we're taking from the grower front. Transportation, we try to definitely, that's like the larger carbon footprint, but that's what we're trying to neutralize in a lot of different ways. By 2027, we actually want to be a carbon neutral company. So we're taking a lot of steps, measures towards that. Coming to once the flowers are getting used, right? A lot of couples, families are kind of getting a lot more sensitive about the topic, which I think is amazing. But the unfortunate bit is it comes at a little cost. And I think in the larger scheme of things, the cost towards this is proportionately less. So a lot of families will start kind of accepting this additional cost. But as a company, what we are kind of, when we are dismantling, so it's right from sourcing to reducing the use of OSs. So now there are multiple ways of kind of using different techniques to kind of do your designs to avoid the use of OSs as much. But where it is required, it's required, to be honest. And when we're dismantling, we try to kind of send experienced florists and not just loaders in to just dismantle, but which are all the flowers that can be kind of taken back. We either kind of make bouquets and share it with the family, or then a good chunk of it go to our facility where we try to make teas, we kind of make pot purees, we're making whole floral extensions of flowers. It could be fragrances, teas, pot purees, like different.
So you do have that.
We do have it in-house. The only tricky bit, like say Fool or the other thing, wherever these facilities are, if the wedding is happening in Bombay, then the whole transportation logistically to transport these to another city becomes, so then we'll try to find in the neighborhood where we can repurpose it. And but all said and done, I think flower it's a natural product, it's going to get decomposed. So if you can segregate the waste, that's the least that any floral company can do. You're doing a good part, I would say.
That's true. That's so true. I think the waste management probably needs a lot more attention in the food segment.
Absolutely.
Also,
I think like, you know, people always talk about decor and sustainability, but personally I feel there's lots more to do with food and the waste management of food, like the kind of people that can be served this food, versus I think flour is can get decomposed any which ways.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true. Thank you so much, guys. It was so amazing talking to you guys, and I think the insights that we received today on the entire working of the flower industry and the logistical excellence that goes into it. I wouldn't say nightmare by any standards because it's your bread, butter, jam. But it's been so interesting to hear all of this. Thank you so much for making the time to be a guest at the Wedding Podcast.
Thank you so much, and I think thank you for having us and helping us decode it, because I think people have a lot of myths about like, okay, they just kind of get imported flowers or how flowers are done versus kind of how it can be organized and put in a very professional setup and yet be a part of the wedding space.
No, that's it. I'm telling you, the entire Insider series, the purpose is for us to make sure that, you know, all of this information reaches our audience. So,
and I think one more interesting myth I would like to break is people have is Interflora is expensive, but I would take this opportunity because I feel, and like, you know, it's recently and a couple of planners said like, hey dude, you all are not expensive, and I was like, see, I told her. Probably because we have the leverage of the online business. True. Where we kind of having the systems in place, people in place, sourcing in place, and we just try to pass on those benefits to the wedding fraternity, and I think overall it's just working well. So
I also think maybe that comes from because when there's an international brand that enters India, the first mindset is, oh, they're going to be probably expensive. But I think it's the best practices that have come. Yeah. It's the organizing and structuring that has come. And I think we have to look at all those and take some quotes from your side.
Yeah. And fortunately, unfortunately, it's like the first wedding that we did in the country was, or the first event we had done in the country was the Ambani event. So then we kind of got placed there, like, you know, it was, but now I think we're working with
now
largely.
All the weddings are done in the family. Thank you so much, guys. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. We've just concluded a very interesting episode with Tarun and Anuja from Interflora. I hope you guys have liked this. If you have, please do make sure you like, share and subscribe to the Wedding Podcast.